Dusty Bates, August 3rd. We got everybody in here. All right, Dusty, let's get this thing rolling. All right.
How are you doing?
Good day, sir. Good day. Good day.
Trying to see if I can do a layout where. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh. How you doing, man?
Good. Good. Today we're going to talk about how to list properties the easy way. I've got a calculator that I use, and I wanted to talk about a couple different ways to do it because there's less sophisticated sellers in commercial, and then there's a little bit more sophisticated and maybe a different approach depending on who you're talking to.
Okay. So in this situation, so this is a quick approach to listing properties, right? Just a fast version.
Yeah. So I used to go on and have like a 30-page report that I would give people where I walk them through my strategy and here's all the different values for your property and why, and here's all the comps, and let me lay them out in detail. And then, here's what you can get if you sell it right now. Right. And eventually what I did is I started using I just use it as the example calculator, and I'll bring it with me on my iPad, or I'll just have it on my computer where we'll just run through the numbers with them and we can switch them around, and it works really well. So we'll talk about that. And there's also a little bit more complicated with the more sophisticated owners, and it's an example I have from this week where we presented to list a Walgreens.
Okay,
and we wrote a letter.
That's the deal we kind of mentioned. We talked about a little bit, right? The Walgreens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We presented that and received, and so we're going to talk on Friday and see if we get the listing.
Okay. Now, how long does that typically take for you for once you send like comps and like a evaluation of the property, all that good stuff? How long till you actually follow back up with that particular lead to see if you haven't heard anything from them?
So in commercial, what you want to try and do if you can is meet with them to present your BOV, your broker opinion of value.
Okay.
Because that's when you're going to get the listing. That's your listing appointment.
BOV, correct?
BOV, broker opinion of value.
Broker,
or BPO, okay. You might know it as a BPO.
I've seen that before on listings. Opinion of value. Okay.
So you want a broker opinion of value, and that's your listing appointment. So you have what we call the 2-part listing appointment, where you're connecting with your database, and at one point you're able to meet with them with some sort of thing of value. So a rent survey, or maybe of something that's for sale down the road. You're going to meet with them and try and get their books and records so you can do a BOV.
Okay.
Right. So you're going to meet with them once, schedule a second meeting where you can present now this BOV. And at the second meeting, you try and get the listing. So if at all possible, you want to meet with them. So they're going to give you the books and records. You're going to, within a week or less, as soon as possible, 3 days, you're going to be back in front of them with the value of their property.
Okay.
Ideally, you'll have an offer too, right? So a lot of times you're competing against different brokers. So you want to bring in, here's what it's worth. Here's what you could replace it with. And by the way, here's an offer for the property. Sign here. Right.
So you're coming with an offer already.
If you can. Yeah. Okay. So it depends on the time frames. Like the Walgreens, we didn't have the time to prepare an offer.
Uh-huh.
Right. So we're still outstanding with some of the firms that own just these drugstores.
Okay.
But they will write an offer on it, and I'll be able to present it to the guy probably tomorrow when he talks about listing his property.
So are you so when you're bringing this offer already to the table, are you just resourcing back from your book of business all the leads that you have in there and sourcing them that way, correct?
Yeah, like I just talked about the 2-part listing appointment.
Yep.
Maybe that thing of value when you sit down with someone is someone who wants to sell. Maybe you don't have the listing yet. This is I'm talking about getting the offer for the one you're doing the BOV for. You can shop that around and try and get another appointment with someone. And so, you're using your database and your book of business. So the people that I've talked to are list that I have, it's over 100 people long that when I sold a Rite Aid a little while ago, called about it. So I kept their information. Now that I have a Walgreens that might sell,
You can shoot that over to them now. It's nice.
yeah, and hopefully get some listings on that end too.
Okay. That's nice. All right. So let's, do we want to look at one of these deals here, or how do you want to do this?
I got two deals. So the Walgreens, and then I have the mobile home park.
Okay.
I was bragging about it a little while ago.
Two different products, right?
Yeah. So two different levels. So Walgreens is going to be a more sophisticated seller. We're going to have a different approach. The mobile home park owner can barely use her email, and she's retiring, and so there's a little bit of difficulty there. It's also a smaller property, so a different level of sophistication. I need to approach that a bit differently. So we can talk about her first.
Okay.
But I just kind of went through. We're just going to lay out the example. We're going to decide how to approach it, and I'll show you what I've done here. So I can probably, let's see if I added this.
There we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
So I sold a mobile home park. I think it was like 2 years ago at this point, from on the East Coast. And when you do that, you do what we call a shop the comp. So I use that target method where really close in, everyone gets a call. A little bit farther out, everyone gets a personal letter, and the whole market gets a postcard. So as you get closer and closer to my subject property, you're going to get more and more points of contact from me. Okay, so this is one of them. Just down the road from the property that I sold, she called me, and she ended up wanting to sell herself at that point. Right, this is a couple years ago, and so this was my initial email at the time. Right, so we spoke, decided she wanted to sell. It's a 50-unit mobile home park. So I asked her for a couple things here, some basic stuff that I asked her for her books and records, basically, and this is what this list is. Right.
So
I
this
just
is
asked for, where's the address? Give me the rent roll, profit and loss for the last year. Mobile home park, it's important to talk about the status of the water and sewer. And then you also want to know like park-owned homes, tenant-owned homes, that kind of stuff. But
you're hopeful that this seller is going to be this organized to have this information as far as rent roll being correct, right?
Yeah, and you get all kinds of stuff. So here's what I got in response to my questions. You can see how organized she was. I didn't get anything attached.
Okay.
I just got this, right? So you can see she's telling me, what her rent is. Not really clear about what's owned, what's tenant owned,
Right.
So very confusing. I had some back and forth with her at the time. She wasn't really motivated at the time.
Okay.
So I stayed in contact with her. And here's what happened after that. Okay. A year, I say 1 year, I guess it's about 2 years at this point, maybe a year and a half. She called me back the other day and said, you know what, I want to sell now. So I wrote down some notes here. This is from my notepad. I just put it up on here.
So she reached out to you after a whole year. Like, were you following up with her throughout that year? Like,
Yes.
touching on her? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't think touching on her, following up.
So we do like 26 points of contact a year. And
Right.
so some of those are emails, some of those are calls. Really, she only responded to the calls. So I called her maybe 4 times or so.
Any text?
I don't really have texts within what I should be doing.
Okay.
But you should text them too. You could if you can automate it, that's a good idea. Just have a text go out every now and then with something of value.
Right.
But the calls are really just to check in and follow up from the last call and try and score that two-part listing appointment. So she called me after that time period, said she wants to sell. So I got a little bit more granular with things. So there are 50 lots, 25 of them are park owned. It breaks down a little bit. There's a couple that are storage, one's an office. So really only 22 are rented to tenants. And then there's 4 tenant-owned homes. So 4 lots that are rented to tenants. Lot rent's still $300, which is what it was when she bought it.
So she didn't have a bump. And
No, just left all of that alone. Same story with the park-owned homes. Those are well below market. And then there's 21 more lots. There's 50 total. So there's 21 lots left that are rent ready. They're ready for you to put a mobile home on it right now. So it's got everything, electric, water, new septic tanks, everything's paved, everything's ready to go. You just got to put a mobile home on there.
So those are pads, right?
Yep.
Just the pads already.
Pad site. Yep.
Oh.
So those are ready. And so what you can do, and on the mobile home side, you don't want to own the park owned homes.
Right.
So this creates a problem with valuation. The one I sold over there had the same problem. Most of them were park owned. So we had to get creative with it. But this is what she gave me. And then there's a little bit more info on the expenses.
Tell me something. Why don't you want to be more of a owner of the actual mobile home? You want to be more of the owner of just the pad itself, correct?
The pad, yeah. Think about how much maintenance goes into the piece of concrete that you own that someone's paying you $500 a month for.
Right.
Compared to a mobile home, which is there's a lot of wear and tear, and they break down quite easily. So there's a lot of repairs involved. So that's why. And then so most mobile home owners will just discount any of the rent associated with the mobile home. They'll just discount. They'll say that doesn't count. And I'll show you why that you can kind of get around that. Okay. But this is her expenses that she gave me. That's $36,300, and then so Timmer. What do you see here that she's kind of missing from her list?
Taxes. Where's maintenance?
Don't see any maintenance. Might be covered under payroll, but
maintenance or repairs.
Yeah, maybe. Might be her fix-it man.
Okay. I got utilities in there. Insurance.
Yep. Don't have any insurance here. That's a big no-no.
Yeah. Definitely want to know
with
that.
Her, she doesn't really have any insurance on here. So if we kind of break that down, here's her income, right? So income's still about 240. But if we divide 36,000 into this number, divided by 239, we end up with about 15% of this gross income is the expenses. Is that within a normal range? Would you expect to be higher or lower, usually, as someone who's going to look at this as an investor or a broker? What would you say?
So what was that final number? I'm sorry.
The expenses are about 15% of the total income.
So that's high, isn't it? 15%.
It's actually low.
That's low.
Yeah. So 15. So usually with multifamily mobile home parks, you'll see 30 to 45% of the gross income ends up being about what the expenses are.
30 to 35%. That's
30 to 45% or 42%, depending on what you're dealing with. But mobile homes are a bit different than multifamily or apartments. So when you see something that's low, there's obviously something missing. The insurance is missing, maintenance, repairs. There's, a lot of these things are pretty low. The taxes are obviously low. So
that
adjust that when we list it.
That automatically throws up a red flag with you when you look at something like this or any.
Yeah, it just tells me that when we were looking here at her expenses, these are not all of the expenses, and they're probably not all of what she's paying for each of these things.
So you think they're somewhat higher in most cases?
I would expect them to be higher. So when I run the numbers, when I'm doing the listing, I'll run it with maybe 25 or 30% on the expenses.
Okay.
So when I present it to someone, I can show. But you can see here, she wants $2.5 million for the property. It's 50 lots. That means it's $50,000 a lot. Only 29 of those lots have homes on them. And most of those are park owned. When I looked at it, it's probably worth 1.5 to 2. Okay, so you got an owner who wants 2.5. Their expenses are not complete. It's probably worth 500,000 or more less than what they want. Okay, is this a dead deal, or should we try and do something with it?
We should try to do something with it. We're off by $500,000.
$500,000, probably more than $500,000, but I'm being generous with $2 million. but I think I can achieve close to that with how I present these.
Okay.
So when I look at this, she just wants to exchange it, or she doesn't want to exchange it. Okay.
She just want to cash out. So
she wants to cash out. She wants to retire. So she's one of those owners who wants to retire, but she doesn't know that she can just roll her money into something that's not management intensive. She thinks she has to pay a bunch of taxes to Uncle Sam, and within in her head, she's capital gains. So she's calculating in her head, okay, what amount of money do I need to live off of for the rest of my life? How much money a month do I need? Okay, she's not telling me that, but I know that's what she's thinking, and that's why she picked 2.5 out of the thin air. Is she's done some calculations and assumed some things, and so here's how I would approach it. I would talk to her, and I'm training. So my agent is actually about an hour away from her. She's in North Carolina. I obviously can't fly to her to try and pitch something for a $2.5 million listing. So I'm training him up on how to present this. We're actually going to have him drive out and present this in person with the listing agreement.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about, when you sell this, you're going to pay long-term capital gains, depreciation recapture. You've got closing costs, commissions. There's a lot of things that go into this. Were you thinking you would walk away with 1.7 or what? What are you thinking? And we break it down by years and months. So maybe she thinks she'll live another 15 or 20 years. 20 years to be safe. That makes about $7,000 a month.
Yeah, and then we had a question on here from Sharon Wu. Will she carry back?
Good question. That's a good question. That's another way to look at it, and that's what we've looked at too. When I explain to sellers, I can give you your price, but you have to give me terms, right? So there's two levers. There's price and terms. And if you want to pull the price lever your way as far as you can to 2.5, I get to pull the other lever my way, an equal amount, right? So if you want 2.5, I'll pay you 2.5 million, but you're going to agree to my owner carry terms on my side, right? It may be worth 1.5 today, but if I have like a 2%, 1% interest owner carry note with virtually no down, I might be willing to pay 2.5. Okay, so that's part of the conversation we'll have with her.
Right.
Is okay, you don't have to pay taxes right now. You want to live off this money. You want to live off of $7,000 a month. Here's how we might structure that. Okay, maybe I say something like, "I'll pay you your $7,000 a month for 20 years, and then you don't have to pay taxes up front. Maybe it's $8,000 a month." But here's how the note will break down. It'll be $5,000 of that will be principal, and $3,000 of that will be interest. And then when you run the numbers, that's like a 3%, 2% loan or something like that, right?
Got it.
So there's lots of creative ways to do that, but that's one of the conversations you have. The way I'm going here is I'm going to show her my calculator now, right? So I've established that, hey, you think you can live off of this for 20 years. We think collectively that's going to be about $7,000 a month. So why don't I show you a way to do that? But then at the end of 20 years, maybe you live longer. Maybe you want to hand this down to someone. You still have the asset and you still have money coming in, and maybe it's gone up every year. Right? You've got rent increases. Would you want to see that? She'll say, yeah. And so let me share my calculator real quick.
And this is a top secret calculator, right?
There's ways to get it. Yes. But yeah, this is what I use to get my listings a lot of times. Okay, can we see that?
And if you're getting value from this show, please just click the like button wherever you're watching. We appreciate it. All right, so this is the calculator here.
So yeah, I've kind of loaded her up on the left. A lot of times what'll happen is the one on the left, the subject asset, will end up with less monthly money than the one on the right that I compare it to. So it's a no-brainer oftentimes, like, oh, I can just sell it and I can buy something else and I'll get more money a month. Great. Hers is not the case. That's why we have to go the route of, hey, if you only had, 1.7 to live off of, what would that break down to per month? And we said $7,000 a month, right?
Okay. Right.
So what I've done here is I've pulled in Kingsbarn. Kingsbarn is a It's called a DST. This is one of their offerings that I'm looking at, where it's a well-guaranteed trophy property, and it's spinning off 6% per month return. And you get to place however much you want with it. A lot of times I'll have owners that'll have leftover money from an exchange, and instead of paying taxes, we'll place it with them in one of their offerings.
With Kingsbarn?
This is a good way to, it's a good way to show an example of she doesn't have to do anything. She parks whatever money she wants with them, and they pay her a return. They do all the work with the taxes. She just walks away.
I think that's a good episode. We should get her on to kind of explain a little bit what she does a little bit more in depth too.
Kingsbarn, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is their offering, and I'm assuming, let's actually assume 1.7.
Okay.
7. 6% return. That means we would not be 90,000. No, 2 a year.
I think your down payment at the very top. There you go.
The way this works, I use the down payment. If you're paying cash, the down payment is what the price is. It just helps you figure out what a loan amount might be. But you can see the example here of an actual property. If she sold her property and she had 1.7 left over, she could place it with Kingsbarn and have $8,500 a month coming in. That will go up every 5 years or every year by a certain percentage. So after 20 years, it's going to be way more than $8,500 a month, right? And so rather than retire and pay a bunch of taxes, you could retire, buy a property that you don't have to do anything with. The equity will go up, the cash flow will go up, and then at the end of the day, you'll still have something that you can either sell if you want to, or roll forward into something else,
or leave.
And
it.
so when we present stuff like this, that's when they tend to be like, okay. Let me see. By the way, we've got an offer for 1.7 right now for you, and then they say, okay, I'll sign. And that's the quick way to, if someone's less sophisticated like this, that tends to be the way that I do it. I take their property, say, here's what you're telling me you're getting cash flow wise. Here's what you can do with that money rolling forward.
Got it.
Yeah. And then I just use this thing. So it's got different things like a loan calculator. I've got an analysis here if we wanted to do, multiple properties or a property with multiple tenants, like a retail strip or an office building or something we could do there. Yeah. We could do, and then it's got a calculator for boot too. So boot is if you have leftover money from an exchange and you don't do the exchange, you can calculate the taxes you'll have to pay on that boot that's left over, right?
Gotcha.
So sometimes someone they'll sell a property, they'll have some debt that they would have to replace, but instead they just take the equity and they plug that into something, and then there might be boot left over that they didn't get a loan for. So you have to make sure that you have enough cash for not only your reinvestment, but if you're not going to do the full thing, you want to make sure you don't have a tax consequence that you can't afford.
And give us an idea what boot stands for again.
Boot, I don't know if it's an acronym. But boot is the leftover money that you have to pay taxes on when you do an exchange. So if I have a sale at 1.5 and I reinvest 1.3 of that, there's 200 I'm going to take into my account. At the end of the year, I have to pay the taxes on that. That's called boot.
Okay. So that's what you're paying on the additional that was not a part of the 1031.
Yeah, so that portion, so that 200,000 in that example, that would be what you have to pay taxes on, and you will have a unique tax situation, right? So long-term, short-term capital gains, depreciation and recapture, that depends on your situation. Did you own it for 30 years or did you own it for 5 years?
Right.
Because again, depreciation is adult pretending. We're pretending that it's losing value every year, and after a certain amount of time, it's going to fall apart, and so that's claimed as a loss on my taxes. It's not a real loss; it's taxable write-off. But when I sell it, they want to recoup those losses, right? So if I resell it and I make money on it, they're going to recoup all the stuff I wrote off as profit.
Got it.
I'm not sure if that makes sense. Maybe we need to do a 1031 video again.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think we have it on our playlist for this one. For this show, because it was on when we first started. We were rough. It was just working out the kinks. So we definitely need to do a 1031. We need to get Kingsbarn on the show. These calculators, Dusty, you've created these calculators, or this is something that you?
Yeah, it just this is what I switched over to instead of presenting like a 30-page BOV. I switched over to this because owners like this lady no one really cares. You want to look at that last page that says you can trade this for this, and you can trade all of your headaches and trouble for nothing. And for most owners who may not know the value of their building, their return on the building they're getting for the equity is very low. Mm-hmm. Her, for example, we have a different situation. She has an overinflated sense of the worth of the building, and she's not reporting the expenses correctly. So she's in her head thinking, you can see her on the left, that she's getting like $20,000 or $17,000 in net income every month.
Right.
She's probably not getting anywhere near that, maybe half that. So we have to do this other route for her, who has an overinflated sense of the value. Say, well, if you were to sell it, here's how that would break down. And by the way, I've got a better way of doing that, where you don't have to pay taxes and you get to keep ownership of a building.
Got it. And so when you're presenting this, or you have this calculator, are you actually showing the seller this calculator is this printed out already, ready to go, or are you plugging these numbers in as you go?
We will either have it printed out, or we will have a computer with us, laptop, where we can bring it up and we can then play with these numbers back and forth. We can say, well, CoStar has this other property that's listed, and we'll plug that in, and they start to get excited as we're playing with different options.
Right.
As you can see there, it's got different options that you can go through, and we can compare a bunch of stuff. This is also what I use once we enter an exchange. We've got the subject here constantly of what they sold, and then we've got the replacements options on the side there.
Okay.
And so we've used the rule of 3 before. So I've got here, different drop downs where we can say, okay, here's where we're at. Letter of intent's out on that one. And this one over here where we're in the contract phase of this one, right? So we can keep the 3 in front of us while looking at the subject property and remembering what we're replacing. Okay, which again is usually we're going to get more income, less headache.
Yeah, and then Sharon has another question. Do you explain to the lead, the seller, about the expenses, depreciation in the presentation?
When we're in front of them, I don't try and argue with them before we're in front of them. I'm not going to tell you, no, you're wrong. Right. I might say stuff like, well, what about, like I asked her, like, okay, well, do you have any insurance on the property or the buildings at all? And she said, not really. And so I didn't press it.
Okay.
So if there's stuff that like you called out, like it's a red flag, hey, where's the insurance? We'll ask them about it, but we won't say, well, your repairs are you really not doing any repairs? We'll wait till we sit down with them and actually get to the bottom of what they're actually making.
Right. Because they
when most likely with our listing to sign.
Got it.
Yeah. But that's the simple way to do that for an owner that's probably less sophisticated. And then the other way we would do it, we can dig into that as much as we want, is the more sophisticated owners who own lots of property and they don't really need to see something this simple or really care about it. They probably know a lot of what I'm showing up on this screen if they're more sophisticated.
If they already understand it.
So
how does this look? So this is more of a model of a not a manufactured home. It's Why am I drawing a blank?
This was a mobile home park example.
Yeah. What
But
about
this would work for anyone who is you call them like a mom and pop owner.
yeah?
Someone who maybe owns one of these. Maybe this is their whole life savings into this. They don't really do the investing thing a whole lot.
Right.
A lot of times, these mom and pop owners, they bought it for $500,000, and their net income on it is $50,000. Okay, so in their head, I bought it for 500. I'm getting 50,000 return every year. My true return is 10%. 10% of 500,000 is 50,000, right?
Right.
Whereas when we come in, we run this number and we say, you know what, your equity is actually much higher than that. Your equity is actually $2 million. Okay. So you're getting $50,000 on 2 million.
And so they don't understand that right off the bat, correct?
Yeah, your return is not 10%. Your return is, I have to make sure I don't say it wrong. Yeah, your return is 2.5%.
It's 2.5%. Okay.
Yeah, you're getting 2.5% return every year. Now, what we could do is we could redeploy your $2 million equity into this other property that actually, guess what? You don't have to bother with at all for the next 20 years. And by the way, it's not guaranteed by a bunch of tenants who live there. It's guaranteed by Taco Bell franchisee who's worth $40 million, right? And he's got a 20-year lease. Yeah. Yeah. And so your $2 million is actually not going to make you 50,000. It's going to make you 100,000 a year. Would you like to sell your $2 million property and buy another $2 million property? And they say yes. And that's where this calculator really helps out, because they can see side by side. Okay, wow. In my head, I was thinking I'm getting a return on 500,000. I'm getting a return on my equity that could be redeployed.
Right.
And that's important to talk to about. You know, your equity is just sitting there, and you're wasting money by not redeploying that somewhere else.
So you're going over this portion of it during that meeting presentation during that time, and at this point, are you pretty much what's the closing deal? I mean, like, way to close this deal and get it under contract right then, as far as listing.
Let's assume this. So let's say the gross rents are $5,000. The expenses are right.
Uh-huh.
Oh, whoops, too many zeros. All right, so he's getting 50,000. Okay, and I'm saying, well, you could take your 50,000. You thought your 500,000 was getting you a 10% return. It looks like when we run the numbers, your return is actually only 2.5%.
Yep.
Okay. Now I went ahead and I usually have 3 examples. I went ahead and put 3 examples here. These are actually on the market, and I bring the brochures with me, right? So this Kings Barn has a brochure. I actually loaded it up, and we can. Oh no, I didn't load it up. Here's the brochures. Now we could take your 2 million, we could sell it and replace it with this one. And guess what? This one doesn't have any management needs. And I explained to them how net lease properties work. And guess what? It's not 2 million, it's 1.7. So you may have to pay taxes on $300,000.
Yeah.
Obviously there's tax, there's commission and closing costs, but you may have some extra money that you're going to have to take with you. Or I've got some ways to redeploy that if you want that too. But look here, your return is going to double, and you're going to get rid of all your management needs. You're not going to have to, run down there and fix any toilets or collect rent. Right. It just shows up in your account every month. And they'll ask a bit more about, well, what is this? And I'll say, well, this is a Taco Bell, and it's guaranteed by so-and-so, and here's how many he owns, and here's how much he's worth. And you have an increase every 5 years of 7.5%, and it's on a 20-year lease. So what I usually do is after 10 years or so, I start looking for a window to sell it and then reinvest in something that's another 20-year lease. Because after it gets below 10 years, obviously the risk is they'll leave because they're a tenant. Right. So the value will go down a lot after 10 years. So just make sure you keep recycling this method every 10 years or so.
And you said, are some people signing 20-year leases, like the big box brands?
Most of the, I do a lot of fast food. Most of those will be on at least 20-year leases, 20 to 25-year leases. There are some concepts that don't do that. Starbucks is notorious for just doing 10-year leases. And then they also have an exit clause where they can actually each year, I think after year 5, just cancel.
Okay.
Just leave, so you want to be, obviously this is stuff you research before you get in contract on stuff.
Right. Are there other companies that have those clauses in their contract besides that you know of?
None. I mean, I know Dollar General and the dollar stores tend to be on double nets at 10 years, sometimes 15 years.
Okay.
Walgreens, for example, the one we're looking at on the other one, they're on 70-year leases. They sign 70-year leases, but after 20 years, they have an option to cancel every 5 years.
So I get the listing. I now have to find a tenant. If the tenant is not inside of the property, like I'm looking for a Taco Bell, but they're about to be up on their lease. Let's say they only have 3 years left or 4 years left that my client wants to go and purchase. How am I structuring that deal to be able to make it likely that my seller is going to want to buy that Taco Bell, knowing that they're almost out of their contract, their lease?
I usually would not put someone, especially someone new, in a situation like that. Okay. Most of the time, I'm going to be offering 15 or 20-year term properties. Now, we can have that conversation. Like, if you want a better return than what I'm showing you here, we can do that. It's just the risk is going to go up. Okay. As the return goes up above what tends to be market, the risk is going to go up. As the return goes down, the risk is going to go down. So we can find an 8% return project, but the risk is going to be go up at the same rate. So where do you want to be on the risk versus profit scale? Right? There's a scale. I actually have I should have loaded that too, but there's a scale that we have where it's got raw land and it's got corporate guaranteed, money's already in the bank for the next 20 years, fast food. Right. And we have examples all along it. And so where would you like to be on the scale?
Someone retiring on that level is probably want to be more safe, less risky. Am I right?
Yeah. And that's where they'll gravitate toward I'd like to be on the safe side. And I say, okay, well, yeah, and here's the return is going down, but you're much more better guaranteed than you are on this side with the 3 years left on the Taco Bell and you don't know the sales. Okay. I actually did put someone into it was actually a Taco Bell in Stockton that only had 4 years left on the lease. It was one of the original Taco Bells. It was there for like 60 years or something. They were on their original lease and it was their last option to extend. And that was the last couple of years of their lease. So you have to renegotiate with them, right? We happen to know the traffic count and the store sales for that location, and the store sales were really good compared to the rent. We knew that the rent had to go up significantly, and when they negotiate that store for another 20-year lease, not only are they going to stay or leave, but she's going to probably double the value of the building by increasing the rent to market.
So what's the time frame as far as if I know this lease is due and is up in 4 years or 3 years? What's the normal time frame where you're reaching out to that tenant to see if they want to renew for that 10 years?
I would do that immediately. Yeah, 3 to 5 years out. I want to start asking. A lot of times there's a clause in the lease that says we're not allowed to tell you if we're going to stay or leave more than 12 to 24 months in advance. That's usually part of the lease, is they are not allowed to notify you either way if they're going to renew or exercise their option with more than like usually 12 to 24 month window. So usually it's not less than 12. Like you have to let us know between 12 and 18 months.
Right, because it's going to be a pain trying to rush and get,
Yeah. So some tenants will tell you, someone like, hey, you have 4 years left. Would you like to renew? And they'll say, I can't tell you. Some of them will. So yeah, we're selling X amount per month, per year, and you're writing this down because now you know the store sales. That's very important. So they say yes. I say, great. Would you like to exercise your option to extend? Right now, you got 5-year option to extend. You got 4 years left on it. Do you want to do one or two of those? We actually did a Denny's years ago where the owner he was 84 years old at the time. And he owned a Denny's that only had, I think it was less than a year left on their term. And they were not telling him, I forget the situation, but they wouldn't really tell him what they would do.
It was less than a year?
Less than a year, if I remember. This was years ago, like 5-6 years ago. But what we did is we came in and we renegotiated a 20-year term. So they exercised all of their options and took it from almost no term left to basically 20 years.
Wow.
On the term. And he gave them, I think it was 3 months of free rent in exchange.
3 months of free rent?
Mm-hmm. So you take that into consideration for value. What was the value of the building when there was almost no term left versus what's the value of the building when there's 20 years left? And
yeah, I would think the value would go down with a less, with a tenant occupied property with less than 3 years on the,
As you get less than 10 years, the decrease in value goes toward what it would be worth vacant with no income, exponentially, quicker and quicker. Right? So if you're 10 years or more, then it's not going to go down very much. It's going to stay roughly the same between 10 and 20 years, 10 and 15 years. But under 10 and under, you're going to start to see that value drop a lot.
So is that tactic, is that used for when a seller knows they're going to sell, let's say a triple net lease, they want to renew that lease with that tenant for at least 20 years, then put it on the market, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Got it.
And you can do like we did. You can do negotiations on. You could do some rent abatement like that. You could adjust their rent slightly. So the Walgreens, for example, in 2014 was looking for a new loan, and they negotiated them to extend basically another 10, 15 years for I think $1,000 less in rent or something like that, something silly. But they exercised their option. They actually waived their right to cancel because Walgreens can cancel. They don't have options. And they were able to get a new note by doing that. So yeah, there's different ways to do it.
And are you studying these different businesses and knowing their clauses when they're able to bet, if they have a clause in there where they can say, hey, we can leave it any time, or, is that just out of experience that you know this information, or are you actually researching these different tenants?
As you come across new tenants, I'll do the research. What's the standard lease type? What did they usually go in under? Like Dollar General, again, was a new one for me when I came across it. And that's when I found out, usually double net leases, owners on roof and structure. And then, they're usually on 10 or 15-year leases, but you'll research them as you come across them.
Okay.
And you'll start to get to know them quite well over time.
And know those lease clauses and all that good stuff. You start to know the different people in that product, right? Like you were telling me before about restaurants, someone that has Burger King's down to a T. They know exactly, when where they have them listed, all that good stuff about Burger King's, right?
KFC's.
Oh, KFC.
He's got a majority of the KFC's in the national accounts, yeah. Right. And they're all franchisees, right? So you don't just go to corporate and get, their account. And the way to get in with groups like that is you start to offer your services for free. Like say, hey, I'm Dusty. I'm with EXP Commercial. We haven't met yet. You're in my metro here at Main Street. How is that treating you? And you just have that conversation and say, look, I am a commercial broker. I do this day in, day out. I know the market. Do you have any, when was the last time you analyzed the building down there and find out what your equity position was? And they'll say, if they have someone in mind, they'll tell you. And sometimes they tell you, we got a commercial guy. But you offer, why don't you use me for free? If you ever have anything, if you need, I got CoStar, if you need information on the market, keep my number. And why don't I get your email and I'll send you updates as they happen over here. And let me know if I can do anything. You can use me as your free commercial real estate resource.
So even if they say they have a guy they're already using, you still offer those free services to them. Got it.
Yeah, yeah, and then over time you'll start to get to know them better. You'll provide value, and then that's when you get that 2-part listing sequence that you want.
Okay.
Where you
Got
provide that thing of value, right? I offered to give you a market update, right? You've called me, you've asked for a market update. I said, great, I've got it. Why don't we meet on Thursday at your office? I sit down, I talk to you about the market. I show you my market report. I say, you know what? You said you hadn't analyzed your property for equity position, where that's at. The market's changed a lot. Interest rates have changed. Do you want me to run one of those for you real quick? I'll do it for free. Great. Okay. And I ask them the right questions, right?
Now, are you doing that right?
Property, that's one thing. Yeah, at that first meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can, because you want to get it right away. If they say, yeah, I'll get you the books and records, just send me an email. They might ghost you. But if you can get it, you can write it down right then. At least you have back of the napkin numbers. You can at the very least add that to your database, right? I pay CoStar a lot of money for the information they have, and they have that information just because they call every time someone sells something. They don't even push for information. So a local agent who knows as much as what I was just talking about, like you sat down with someone, you just back of the napkin got some numbers, you added that to your database. CoStar doesn't have that, right?
So
that's where you're over time building value, lots and lots of value. You may not get the listing that time, but guess what? You're going to get the listing of the guy down the road,
right?
Because now you've got something to talk to them about. Your neighbor over here is actually charging a certain amount of rent. They actually have dishwashers in their units they just installed, and they've got a premium on those units. Do you have any dishwashers in your unit? And they say, and we're going down that path of the call scripts, right?
Right.
So that's every bit of information they're saying, I'm writing it down. I'm going to add that to their property on their database. So even if the conversation goes nowhere, I'm updating my database. I'm getting more information about the amenities, rent, concessions, everything about the different properties. And then I'm shopping it over to someone else. I've got another reason to call someone down the road again.
Right. Hey, I know this property right here is going to be selling pretty soon. Here's some details on it.
And and that leads us over to the Walgreens that we were talking about, right? He lives in the Philippines. I don't know him. I just met him. I was referred to him. And he was really impressed with what we sent him, but he's shopping it around to all the brokers too, right? Someone may have a better ear with him and get him to go their way. So my job today and over the next couple of days is to find a buyer, right? So I shopped it out to my contacts. I'm going to follow up with them until someone gets me an offer, so I have a reason to call him again before he selects someone, and get him on a Zoom call so we can get a listing, and I can actually, or at least a commission agreement, and I can get an offer into him.
Right. So are you having the OM sent to your buyers? Are you creating that, or?
I'm creating it right now, but there wasn't enough time to create a full OM.
Okay.
So there's basically bullet point notes on everything, which is how I tend to do stuff with buyers too. So when we do the 3 property thing for a buyer, here's 3 properties. Here's the bullet point overview of all 3 properties. Here's the brochures. And then I make them tell me what's wrong with each of the properties. And so I kind of structure this the same way with my contacts. I send them an email blast and I follow up with voice.
Got it. And so you basically going over the three different properties, showing them the bullet points. So they really don't care about the cute pictures and all that stuff that's in the beginning of the OM. Normally, they really want to get right back to this document here with the numbers, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. So if you've got a buyer and you just send them a brochure and you say, hey, here's a Taco Bell, here's a Burger King. Here's the basics of it. It's got a 10% return. Here's the price. No one's going to look at the brochure, even though I send all the brochures. They only look at what you write in the text. And so I make a point to say all the different points, especially what's important to them. What's the return? What's the traffic count? Sometimes traffic count's important. What's the demographics? And so you highlight the things that's important to the client in your little bullet point list, and they're not going to watch or see the brochure. they'll just look at what you wrote. And then so sometimes too, I do a Loom video. Loom will let you do 5-minute or less videos.
Mhm.
And so I'll just, if I know they're not going to read it, I'll do that still, but I'll also do a Loom video where I just tell them what I wrote to them.
Right. Run through the numbers for them, basically read it to them.
Yeah. You gotta, I mean, people are by nature lazy. So
Yeah.
if you want activity, you got to make sure you feed them the information so that they can make a decision. Because they'll also, clients will be, they'll not want to make a decision, or they'll be nervous because they don't know. Okay. There might be something about the property type that they don't know and they're afraid to ask. So it's your job to over explain stuff to, and make sure you're uncovering what they're nervous about,
Right.
or what they're concerned about, so you can make sure you resolve those issues too.
Awesome. This is good info. So what?
Yeah.
So I know we're almost at the top of the hour here.
Yeah.
So I know you had 2 examples. You had the mobile home park, and we had the Walgreens as an example. As far as having this stuff ready to go at the tip of your fingers, how do you normally organize like all your calculators, all your detailed information of comps and all that stuff? How do you organize that into one listing appointment?
It depends on the sophistication. So with the mobile home park, we've got this calculator. We'll have it printed out for her. We'll have an example of the replacements, each of them. We'll have a printout of her income and expenses, where my guy can actually walk her through each of those and have her explain herself. No insurance. Okay, why don't you have insurance? I don't see any repairs on here. Have you? I see there's a new such and such over there. How did you pay for that? So we'll have all that, and then we'll also have the listing agreement too in there. So he's going in person to do that. If I have to do it on email, which I had to do with the Walgreens, I will do some Loom videos where I, am myself. I let them see me. I talk about my accolades a little bit. Usually, like, I focus on different topics that I think they'll be of interest, but it lets them get to know me a little bit. And then I'll do that bullet point summary of what I'm presenting here, and then provide the rest of it. I've got with the more sophisticated buyers or sellers, like I prepare this is the letter. It's called a proposal, right?
Right.
So you can't read it. I blacked out some of the sensitive information, but it's a proposal. It's just a letter saying, hey, thanks for letting me look at your property. Page 1 is, here's what your property is. Here's anything important, like here's the lease and the relevant factors about the lease. At the bottom, you see there, I've got a comment on, do you want to sell it or refinance? Because they could refinance it and pay the same they're paying right now for, even though the interest rates are higher. And then on the second page, I evaluate the property. So I've evaluated it as, here's what it's worth. Here's why it's worth that. And then as a separate attachment, I've got the comps. So sale comps and active sales comps. I discuss the market. So in here, I've discussed why some of the comps on the active side are lagging and they're over a year long, and we need to be on a lower price point.
Okay.
Conclude. Here's what you would pay list it for if you were doing a capitalization approach. Here's what you would do for it if you're doing a price per foot approach. And then here's what I can do for you. Page 3. Here's how cool I am. Here's what I do. Page 4. Here's me. Here's my team. And that's it. So it's 4-page proposal. Not concise, to the point. They don't care about all the other stuff. And if they do, I've got the comps. I've got the sub-market report, which is over 40 pages from CoStar. That's all in there too. But the main thing is this 4-page, very to the point. Here's your problems. Here's the positive. Here's what it's worth. And then in the email, I say, hey, I want a 6-month listing. Here's my dual variable commission and what that is. Let me know where to send a DocuSign so we can get this listed. I've got people already interested in this. I just need to lock in my commission before I present anything.
So they're going to probably run this through a real estate attorney to get this contract taken care of. I mean, reviewed and then signed off on, correct?
This right here is just a letter. It's an informal letter. It's a BOV. It's a fancy way of doing a BOV.
Right.
You could do it in different ways that's more flashy, and it's like 15 pages. Essentially, I've done a 2-page BOV. Here's page 1 about the property, and here's page 2 where I've valued the property. That's all he needs to look at, right? So if you're on the higher end of investing and you invest in a lot of stuff, you want to know the bottom line. You don't want to know usually all the details.
Get straight to the point.
I got all the details in my email. I've got all the stuff he wants to see if he wants to look at it that supports this 1 page. But a lot of times on the higher end, they want 1 page. They want it to the point. They don't want any fluff. If there's something bad, they want to know it. And so you give it to them. And so we'll see probably tomorrow if we'll get the listing.
So yeah, definitely gonna come back to that next week. So let's find out if we get the listing. That'd be awesome to hear, live. If we got it.
Yeah, we'll do.
Good stuff, man. So, all right, Dusty, I appreciate this time. So what do we want to cover next week? What do we want to look into next week? We want to get
do we want to go back over 1031 exchanges?
Yeah, I think we need to
get boot and all that stuff.
The understanding of the 1031 exchange and how that's beneficial for anyone. We did cost segregation already, so we took care of that. So the 1031 would be good for next show. I appreciate this going through this detail here. Like you made it simple to understand.
I hope I did. I feel like I kept going
4
in
pages,
tangents. Good.
Pretty simple to me. So thank you, everyone. This is Lawrence King. I'm here with my co-host, Dusty
Bates. Commercial
All right,
Brothers.
we'll be back next week on Thursday, same time, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
See you guys then.